And we're back. Salutations from space and aloha from Earth, friends. This is Gemini Brett. Just here on November 30th, 2020, experienced this penumbral lunar eclipse, which actually basically looks just like a full moon, because the penumbral lunar eclipse is not the moon moving through the shadow of Earth, at least not through the shadow of Earth's body, but rather through the shadow of Earth's atmosphere. This is what I saw in the sky. Looks a lot like a full moon. It was in a very powerful place of the heavens, at the eye of the bull, Aldebaran, one of the four royal stars, we are told, in the gateway of the sacred hoop of stars, which when the moon's not around and bright city lights are not either, looks much more like this. And I spoke about that positioning and some of its esoteric energies in a previous video here, part 1, where I also spoke about the astronomy of eclipses and how close, for example, a lunar eclipse must align to the lunar nodes for us to experience Earth's shadow on the lunar body. And generally speaking, it's about within 12 degrees of a node that you can have any kind of eclipse, a lunar eclipse, I should say. You have to be within 6 for it to be a total lunar eclipse. And even then, that could be partial. Within 4, definitely total. And there's a whole zone of partial lunar eclipse, but this is in the penumbral lunar eclipse zone. So again, moon not moving through the shadow of Earth's body, where we experience occultation, but rather through the shadow of Earth's umbra, or atmosphere, so no occultation. Just realizing that there's one, here's the eclipse limits. There's one astronomical thing I meant to share in part 1 and forgot to, so I'm going to share that now. This is November 30th, 2020, the time of the full moon. Let's see, that was 1:29:40 a.m. here locally. So I'm going to dial that in. Okay. And right with Aldebaran. And one thing that I was contemplating, because this eclipse was very close to my own ascendant. It's Aldebaran ascending when I was born, 10 Gemini. And I was contemplating how a few years back, so let me go 3 years ago, but 3 days after that, there was a full moon here at Aldebaran 2 that was actually an occultation of Aldebaran. So let's see, this is December 3rd, 2017. And so this is a cool thing also, where we can learn something about the nodes and the bendings in the course of the moon as the nodes move through the zodiac. So let me show that back then. The nodes were at Aquarius, South Node, Leo, North Node. Okay, so those would be the places where the moon's path intersects the sun's path. And the nodes, over the course of about 18.6 years, very slowly transit the zodiac, move about the zodiac in a retrograde motion, generally speaking. So since that time of December 3rd, 2017, when the nodes were Leo, Aquarius, and now for this Gemini full moon, which was a penumbral lunar eclipse, because the nodes have moved from North Node Leo to North Node Gemini. And so the Gemini full moon, close enough to those lunar nodes to be an eclipse, in this case a penumbral lunar eclipse, right? So, you know, where the nodes go, so go the eclipses. But this idea of lunar latitude, how far north or south of the plane the moon is, also shows us things like occultations of stars, which are amazing events. And there was a few years ago, let's go to that December 3rd time, an actual occultation of Aldebaran by the moon. Let's see, it's just about aligning here. I was going to be on a plane, which I figured was the only place I could possibly witness this thing, and then I canceled the flight because my heart was flying in a different direction at the time. But you can see that the moon's path here at that time in 2017 was very close to Aldebaran. The moon's a little bit bigger than she's much bigger than Aldebaran. The sky, Stellarium, actually weird, I have to say. Show me the moon at I have to scale the moon up, but really the moon is like this big in our sky. But see, like the path of the moon doesn't have to go right through a star for the moon to occult a star, because of course the moon is bigger than a point. She's a disk in our sky. So you can see at some point that night, it's now off our screen, but at some point that morning, I should say, of December 3rd, 2017, from only particular places on the Earth, the moon could visibly be seen occulting Aldebaran, which is an amazing thing. But where, let me go to today, where the moon is now, because the nodes have moved here, well, because the moon's crossing of the ecliptic is so close to Aldebaran, getting closer to Aldebaran actually, but because Aldebaran is not on the ecliptic, that actually means there's no chance Aldebaran can be occulted, yeah? And that shows us, I think, a lot to contemplate anyway, about the difference between lunar events in regards to proximity to nodes, which means eclipse, and other phenomena, occultations, not only about Earth's shadow on the moon, lunar eclipse, or moon occulting sun, right? Our star, solar eclipse, but also moon can occult other stars. This is a fun thing to consider, actually, if the sun was not around and somehow we were able to be. The only way we would experience the moon or the planets, all right, which are visible only because they reflect sunlight back to us. They're each unique kinds of, solar mirrors, truthfully. The only way we would experience them is them occulting stars. I love that, right? There's something about the darkness that teaches us about the light. And that's a good phrase for us to segue now into, well, what do these eclipses mean? So let me take myself out of the picture. And I'll even kind of take my location out of the picture by using a global house system here, which would be the 0 Aries wheel, or the so-called natural zodiac. Why is this natural zodiac? Because 0 degrees tropical Aries is due east of the center of the Earth, where we are all connected, where we are all one, where we measure astrology as far as planets and the signs are concerned from. So this is kind of the houseless system in a sense, or it's just based on what were once called the terrestrial houses, which are the signs, whereas the celestial houses, as they were called, are what we now call houses today. Okay. So in that sense, Gemini full moon in the 3rd sign of the natural zodiac. And a very penumbral lunar eclipse, but here's the trip. When we have a penumbral lunar eclipse, which means it's so far from the node, right? Excuse me, in this case, 11 degrees away. Well, how many days between full moon and new moon, right? And this has to do with the, might have it here, the synodic month, okay, moon and sun. which is about 29.5 days, so half of that's about 15. Well, 15 days after this, the sun moves about 1 degree per day. The sun's currently moving almost exactly 1 degree per day. So the sun's going to move 15 degrees in 15 days, or 14.5 degrees in 14 days, now 11 degrees from the node. So this means that the coming new moon in Sagittarius will be so close to the nodes, here in this case just about 3 degrees and 12 arc minutes, that therefore she will be close enough. Oh, did I just close that? No. Close enough for us to experience a total solar eclipse. I mean, look, the sun and moon meeting within 9 degrees and 55 arc minutes of either nodes guarantees a total solar eclipse to be seen somewhere on Earth. Where exactly? Well, moonblink.info will show me when we highlight this December 14th, 2020 total solar eclipse, which will last in its totality for 2 minutes and 10 seconds. This is where it will be seen. Now, when a lunar eclipse happens, truthfully, anywhere where it's night, and therefore the moon is above the horizon and the weather allows, we'll see the lunar eclipse. I mean, interestingly, they show this in Moonblink, kind of what I feel should be opposite, but it's anywhere that's in the light. However, this eclipse was penumbral and therefore really just looks like a full moon. But I love when lunar eclipses happen and you get photographs from, in this case, we would get photographs from Asia and North America on both sides, and some of South America and Australia. And everybody's got a different perspective of that lunar eclipse. So it's really a fun kind of global experience in our day and age to witness many different perspectives of the same event. Right, so the moon is much smaller than the Earth. She's 3/11ths the size of Earth by diameter. So when the moon moves through Earth's shadow, the entire shadow of Earth can blanket the moon. This was not the case for tonight's penumbral lunar eclipse, right? But when the moon moves through Earth, the shadow of Earth's body, right, total lunar eclipse. So, and the whole world where it's night and weather allows can experience that. Whereas a solar eclipse, and this will be a total solar eclipse in a couple of weeks on December 14th, 2020, that's only experienced in its totality in a very small kind of curve on the Earth, right? So here's an apt metaphor. The sun is the projector. The Earth is a screen, right? You're in the movie theater. And then you just kind of put a little ball moving across the projector, right? And then so that's going to cast a little kind of line or like a curve on the screen, depending on the path of the ball that you bring in front of the projector, right? Try to do this without getting your hand in the way, you're going to cast more shadow. I mean, you could do one of those butterflies or whatever. But even if you do, you're not going to occult the entire screen unless you put your butterfly hands really close to the projector, and the moon, which is a little ball, is pretty far from the projector called the sun. It's much closer to the screen, the Earth, right? So it's actually just somebody walking in front of the screen. You're like, hey, sit down, I'm watching a movie here. Remember when we used to be allowed to go to movies? Let's get back to that, because that has a lot to do with this eclipse. And by the way, this is probably where this talk gets a little heavier for some. So this is where this eclipse will be seen in its totality. There was going to be a huge event down there. I'm sure that was canceled. I haven't really tuned in, but we're going to see some pretty cool photos from here. This is one of the greatest places for sky gazing in the world. And so there's a lot of great astronomers and astrophotographers who live around there. Just because you don't see it in its totality, it doesn't mean you can't see it in its partiality. And so this solar eclipse will also be seen up into Bolivia, Peru, Uruguay, a lot of Brazil here, down in a bit of the Antarctic. Maybe just a taste in very Western South Africa, it looks like. My voice always does that when I have to tilt my head in these images to see the continents that are kind of off screen. Not really. I think this is where it ends. But anyway, I bet you people will get on boats to go out there and see this total solar eclipse. That would be a fun thing to do. But maybe dangerous. Because eclipses can be dangerous. Now, I want to shun the ideas of superstition in astrology. And the idea that that we should like hide under a rock when eclipses happen, and if you see it, you're doomed. Yeah, but I have experienced some very painful events around eclipse times, certainly, and I've seen people nearly die, and when things are really strongly configured to their own nativity, like when the eclipse aligns. And so I've come to respect this more than I once did, I think. Let's have a look at these two charts. I mean, so I did a talk from Hawaii a couple of weeks ago for the Scorpio new moon, where I talked about, okay, we're in a Scorpio new moon, Gemini full moon, this Gemini full moon, this Gemini penumbral lunar eclipse, lunation. And that it's a lunation of magic and the importance of spells and that. So you can go watch that at my YouTube page, which I think is linked either, I think my name, Gemini Brett, or maybe More Than Astrology. And so one way for us to always kind of be playing with lunations is, okay, new moon, full moon. And in that sense, this is the full moon of a Scorpio new moon lunation, right? So here's the Scorpio new moon. Too far from a node to be an eclipse, as you can see, followed by the Gemini full moon. Maybe I'll switch these around. So here is the 2020 Scorpio new moon. Or we can see that this Gemini lunar eclipse will be followed by a Sagittarius total solar eclipse. And by the way, that Sagittarius solar eclipse will then be preceded by a Cancer full moon. Now, too far from the nodes, 19, 20 degrees out to be an eclipse at all. But today the focus will be on these eclipses. So here's the Gemini eclipse on the inside, and the Sagittarius eclipse, which will follow on the outside. And we look at them one by one. I mean, interestingly, we have this inconjunct of the Gemini moon with Venus, a very strong angular quincunx, but also whole sign style and inconjunct from the moon to Mercury. I mean, of like maybe highest interest, as we have an inconjunct of the Sagittarius sun with its dispositor Capricorn, and that's why the moon Mercury thing becomes a little more interesting from the kind of rules of classical astrology than the moon Venus quincunx, even though that's more angularly aligned, or blindly unaligned, if you will, because Gemini, of course, is said to be ruled by Mercury, so that in conjunct, Mercury cannot see the moon, who's in a sign that she governs. And Jupiter cannot see the sun, who's in the sign that he governs, according to the tradition. So there's something very inconjunct about this Gemini lunar eclipse, right? And, you know, I mean, a lot of people probably ran out to see this thing and were like, lunar eclipse, and they were like, wait, did I miss it? Am I out here at the wrong time? Because lunar eclipses are penumbral. There's some very powerful alignments that we see here in, for example, the Venus-Uranus opposition, the moon, sun, the full moon's wedge with Chiron. The one thing that I think we should pay maybe particular attention to is the truth that Neptune, who just stationed direct yesterday, 2 days ago. Yesterday, what day is it? Anyway, is square to the lunar nodes. And that's kind of a what day is it feeling? What year is it, right? What the fuck is going on here? That's the right question to be asking right now. And I think that's very much reflected not only in Neptune, it can be very beautifully alchemically disillusionary, releasing us from our grip on what we believe reality to be so we can be taken by the seas to the island of truth. But it can also be delusion and intentional confusion by the media, if you will, and mob think and masses. And that's where I'm going to start going here, right? So if you're not feeling that, turn this off. As our friends at YouTube and Facebook might just do for us. We'll find out. Because we, friends, are in a terrifying age of censorship. And not only Neptune at the nodes, or really because Neptune moves much more slowly than the nodes do. This is actually the lunar nodes squaring Neptune. They are moving into position to perfectly square Neptune, who's been in Pisces for some time. And this is one of the ways where the Earth, Moon, Sun system, which the nodes speak to, right? Because the nodes are from Earth's point of view, Apollo's arrow, where you can draw a line through the points where the paths of sun and moon, of spirit and soul intersect, right? And they are coming in to square Neptune. So what happens is Neptune is now at what's called the south lunar bending. I'm going to show you that in some of these images. I think I closed this thing down. Drats. Well, I'll show it to you in Stellarium. We looked at that lunar nodes diagram plenty. So here's the moment now in Stellarium. Let me zoom out. We'll take the ground away. We'll make this thing a little bit less local. Maybe I can even move through time in such a way that we get 0 Aries towards the left of this wheel, and then I'll move down to a place where that's a little easier to see. Great. This is kind of how we know the zodiac most familiarly, with 0 Aries kind of over here on the left, right? All right, well, here's the moon at this time, very close to one of her nodes, which is where the path of the moon crosses the path of the sun. And they're currently in late degrees of Gemini and tropical Sagittarius. And that places the bendings where the moon's course is furthest from that of the sun. Very close to the cardinal points, but if it's 20 Gemini Sag, then it's going to be 20 Pisces Virgo. 20, so the south node at 20-ish Sag, and so the southern bending, it's 20-ish Pisces. So that's where the moon is furthest from. The moon in her current course is furthest from the ecliptic, or the path of the sun, from Earth's point of view. And you can see that Neptune is right there. Now, Neptune has zone nodes, which look right now are very close to where Jupiter and Saturn live. Neptune's nodes live in Aquarius and Leo. Aquarius is Neptune's south node. So Neptune stays very close to the ecliptic plane, currently a degree away. But, so it's not that Neptune's at Neptune's bendings. Neptune's currently at the lunar bendings. And many modern astrologers, like those from Jeffrey Wolf Green's evolutionary astrology school, I believe from Stephen Forrest's school too, see planets at the lunar bendings, the points square to the lunar nodes. It's like skipped steps on the evolutionary path. Classically, planets at the lunar bendings or the lunar nodes were also certainly emphasized. Seems to be everything classically weren't really seen to be a good thing. Okay, that's an umbrella. I'm looking at this like tree out here now that the sun's starting to shine a little pre-dawn light, which means I really should go out and take a gander at Venus. But I was like, what is that weird thing? And the answer, it's an umbrella. What is that weird thing? That should be the question we are all asking right now. And with Neptune squaring the Gemini Sagittarius nodal axis, with these eclipses in Gemini and the coming solar eclipse in the Sagittarius, with Mercury moving behind the sun in a sign where Mercury himself is said to be in detriment. Now there's a powerful trine to Mars, especially from Mercury, but of course also from this solar eclipse. And that's a beautiful thing where maybe we can get some fire, a new spark for this thing. Mars is coming into square Pluto again. That's interesting. But we can see that the nodes at this time, even closer to, and Mercury having just kind of cleared sometime between tonight's lunar eclipse and the coming solar eclipse, a square with Mercury too. Sorry, Mercury square Neptune. I'll actually show you when that is. So Sagittarius, Mercury square, Pisces, Neptune will perfect on December 13th, 2020, the day before the solar eclipse. I'm also interested in seeing when down the road the nodes will square Neptune, when that will perfect. I think it's kind of close to the inauguration. And one thing that's happening with this Sagittarius solar eclipse on December 14th, yeah, so January 26, 2021, Sun right in between Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. And this is the date when the true lunar nodes will perfect their square to Neptune. So I don't want to get too lost in this chart right now. I'm interested in seeing this Cancer moon quincunx the sun. There's been Cancer quincunxes with Aquarius, and very interesting to me. So for example, there was a total solar eclipse on June 21st, 2020, or June 20th, 2020, depending on where you were looking from, in the first degree of Cancer, the solstice, and that was perfectly quincunx, retrograde Saturn in Aquarius, who had since come back into Capricorn, but will soon, as we know, move back into Aquarius, and soon after Jupiter will catch up for this very significant Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on December solstice, when Mercury is now behind the sun. Mercury is aligned exactly behind the sun from Earth's point of view on December 19th, 2020, right at the galactic center. So there's very interesting things going down. You know, everybody trips on Mercury retrograde, but that's Mercury between Earth and the sun, Mercury closest to Earth, and maybe that's why things get kind of wonky and mercurial. Maybe there's a interference pattern of like the galactic wave that Earth surfs courtesy of the sun at the center of our solar ripple pool. But when Mercury's behind the sun and as far from Earth as possible, is in a time where we're kind of losing our minds, or at least being conscious of that, or being initiated in such a way of the mind going into the dark places where we're told not to go. What is it to have a Gemini lunar eclipse followed by a Sagittarius solar eclipse. What are Gemini and Sagittarius? Now, there's a few things I'll share here. First of all, we see a lot of attention on the mutable signs. It's been a pretty cardinal year in many regards with the Capricorn Council happening, and Mars' long journey through Aries since that sign of his has hosted his retrograde, which turns out to be a kind of rare thing, interestingly. The nodes have been Cancer, Capricorn, so cardinal eclipses. The eclipses go where the nodes go. But now they've moved into Gemini Sag. And we had our last cardinal eclipse with the June solstice, Cancer total solar eclipse. And now we're moving into mutable eclipses. What are the mutable signs? So, of course, they're Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. I think one thing we can say about them is that they are the signs of the spiritual journey in so many ways. Let's just put this thing away and we'll wrap for a bit. Gemini, seeking spirit in the scriptures and the stories and the books and the word. Maybe in the sound a bit, you know, but I think the sound also kind of brings us more towards Virgo, because while Gemini will seek spirit in information, Virgo now has to put it into practice. We chop wood, carry water, right? It's one thing to say, okay, meditating 30 hours a day can help you achieve rainbow body. It's one thing to learn about the, you know, monks in the caves who just left a footprint and then they were out. It's a whole nother thing to engage in such a practice, right? And that brings us into that Virgo sacred space, sacred yoga, sacred work, sacred practice realm. Chop wood, carry water. But now we can do that until we kind of forgot why we started. You know, it said the Buddha starved himself for 4 years and got down to 4 kernels of rice a day. Interesting, that number 4. And then at some point he's like, nah, this isn't working. Like, starving myself is not going to get me there. And he hopefully had a good meal. And then he went and sat under the Bodhi tree, you know. And importantly, he was still grounded, he was still earth, but he was also on the journey. They're like truly kind of seeking. We could also say that his seeking started by dispelling belief, right? You might know the story that's told of Guantanamo Buddhas that, did I just say Guantanamo? Anyway, that his mother died during childbirth, and the prophet said that he would either be a great sage and great bringer of spiritual truth, or a king like his dad, and his dad wanted that. And his dad wanted to protect him from death because he was so hurt over the death of his wife and giving birth to his son, this prince, Buddha. So he had people hiding death from Buddha, like literally picking up dead leaves off the ground so Buddha would never know about death. And he got married and had some kids, and then he found out, and he was like, what and why did these people hide in this place? It's fake and I'm fucking out. And he jumped the wall and he went out there, you know. In a sense, I like to say this: seeking is not believing. Faith is not some belief that is inherited or given to you. That's what we were trained to believe it is in this interesting place. Have a little faith. Believe onto the Lord. Or don't do that, because this is the true religion and it's the only one that will save you or get you, and, you know, whatever. That's just how it is. Why? Don't ask questions. Have a little faith. What? You mean have a little program? Fuck you. And we're out. And I'm going to go have a look. And that's seeking. So we need to dispel belief if we choose to seek. But when we seek, and sometimes that's also, you got to release these practices, especially if they've just gotten so ingrained that you forgot why you're doing them. Why are you meditating 4 hours a day? I forgot. What's it doing for you? I don't know. Seek. That adventure, that Sagittarian thing, the vision quest. And in our seeking, we just might find truth. And what we find especially those truths that really can't be expressed, and they're so unique. We know they're real, but they can't be explained. That's faith. That's that kind of Piscean reality. And when we're there, it's like, why did I do any of that stuff in the first place? Why did I question? why did I engage in these insane renunciate practices? Why did I go look all over the place when I just found out the truth that I am that I was looking for? As it was said, and as I saw in my practice, all the things, right? But it's helpful for us to find out that many say the same thing, but they get there in a different way, and that we can all get there in a different way. Anyway, so the Gemini-Sagittarius axis, I always love to say this, if you really want to learn the zodiac, if you want to learn the signs, contemplate them as their polarity pairs. Just as hot and cold are two sides of one thing called temperature, Gemini and Sagittarius are two sides of one thing. What is that one thing? And what are its two sides? Now, one answer to that is truth. And its two sides is the idea that there is one only truth, right? And you align yourself to it and you stay the course, straight as an arrow. And don't be distracted from it. Go to the truth. Do not be distracted by their lies, by false information, by fake news. That's that Sagittarius side of this axis, if we call it truth. The Gemini side would be there's many, many truths. This guy might be so far from the actual truth, the truth, but it's his truth. And at least he's not lying. At least he's expressing who he is. Not trying to necessarily sell tickets or become popular or whatever. He's just saying it as it is. Now, is it is or is it isn't? Right? Another such grammatical playgrounds. Is it true? Is your truth the truth? Because your truth's not my truth. So which one is the truth? Neither, both, all? You see the inherent issue there. Now, hot and cold aren't allowed to know that they're the same thing, that they're both things called temperature. They're just two sides of it. Because they have to push and pull, really repel. And there's something in that with the truth and every truth. Every person's truth is the truth for them, and that's okay. Take it easy. Well, with Neptune here squaring the nodes, which basically, though really the solar eclipse as we saw is going to be much more strongly aligned with Neptune. Here's the lunar eclipse, right? 9 degrees of the signs with Neptune here at 18, so 9 degrees orb. So it's actually a different thing. I mean, I'm actually interested in that, right? This is a moon Neptune binovile, not a square. But Neptune square the nodes. Where, of course, with the solar eclipse, much more strongly square Neptune, although in this case now the moon's separating from that square with Neptune. Whereas in the lunar eclipse, the moon is applying to square Neptune. For them both, Neptune is squaring the lunar nodes, which won't move far, as you can see. Only 3 arc minutes in these 2 weeks. And that has to do with something with the beautiful bouncing retrograde and direct of the nodes, especially in the eclipse cauldrons, as we are now in. Neptune's offering a lot of opportunity for a higher spiritual understanding of this whole thing, and that disillusionment and this releasing our grip on what we think is reality and what we think is true, so we can be blown by the weird winds into wherever we can go to find a higher truth, if you will. But as I said before, Neptune, in my experience, when I'm looking around, it's like offering just a whole lot of confusion through delusion, and I will say intentional media spin. What is true? How do you feel about truth? The most painful thing for me in looking around in this year of great pain is the sad way that masses have aligned themselves to what I see as very intentional distractions through the manipulation of compassion into mob mentality, into cancel culture, into celebration of fucking censorship. What are you doing? What are we doing? What am I doing? Where do we get information from? Who do we trust? And why are we not offended? I am. Are you? That the news gets to tell you what is and what is not true. That Facebook and Twitter and YouTube can cancel a thing because they declare it fake, because their independent researchers put a stamp of disapproval on a thing. What? Anna brilliantly said this the other day when I was complaining about a comment I received during a presentation in regards to me saying that corporate censorship is utter bullshit, and we need to understand that we are very potentially falling into the dystopian corporate censorship culture that Eric Blair, who is George Orwell, warned us about, not predicted, warned us about, because he worked for the team, okay, in his strange and painful book, 1984. And that it's being done in such a way, really, not only in, speaking of Neptune, not only in that 1984-ish thing, but also in a very Brave New World kind of way. So if you're familiar with the Doors of Perception, a la Aldous Huxley and his dystopian nightmare of Brave New World, where we'll be controlled through pleasure, not pain, and the need to fit in and belong and be seen as like cooperative. Citizens would be more of a 1984 world. Well, both, but you know, in the social group, in the tribe, I want to belong. I want to be cool. I want to level up my status and fit in and be loved. And I want to stay in the dream, get lost in my sensuality needs, or the needs of the tribe, which means don't be monogamous. You got to check out Brave New World. It's a trippy thing, but mostly that we will be dumbed down through drugs and media and screens and pleasure realms and false spirit, I'll say, or maybe true spirit. Who am I to know? What is truth? What is truth? There is only one independent researcher. It is you. There is only one independent researcher in the world, and it is you. It is me in my world. And this was the beautiful point that my beloved Anna said the other day. We need to be very careful with our language. We need to be very careful with what others are doing to our language based upon mob think and social rule and cancel culture, the things you're allowed to say, the things you're not allowed to say, the things that you're allowed to say, but you have to say them in this way or else they're fake or mean. And suddenly words get twisted and corrupted away from their spells. I'm sorry, spells are used against our language, which in so many ways, and this is Gemini's truth, creates our reality. There is one independent researcher, and it is you. But if you're not allowed to access data, information, how can you know what is and is not true? I spoke of the inauguration for the time that the nodes do perfect their square with Neptune. Of course, I'm speaking about the inauguration of the United States president. Sorry to be so national, but it's an interesting thing that's happening here now. The 1776 timing that's used for the birth of this nation by many astrologers shows us that we are currently in the United States undergoing a nationwide Pluto return and, importantly, a Neptune opposition. And things are meant to be evolutionarily compostable, strange, and very strange and disillusional media spin. And a lot of the truth that is happening with the beautiful revolution now is we're waking up to the idea that the dream was actually a nightmare. It's good. That's an awakening force. But there is so much loss of information, and people are celebrating it. And it's so weird that if I say, hey, we should look into this whole election fraud thing, people are like, oh, dude, you're like with QAnon. What the fuck are you talking about? I'm with let's not have lies. Now, dig this. Let's just put ourselves to a test wherever you are. If it turned out that one cat won based upon a bunch of fraud, but he's the one that you need to win because you so despise the other guy, and that's, up to you, that's okay. But if it turns out one won through fraud, your horse won by cheating, would you want that? Anything to get the evil out. And so even if this one has to cheat to win, like, okay, and let's just not ask questions because it's going the right way. It's going to truth. This is truth. That is the lie. So this is truth. So even if we had to lie and cheat for truth to take the throne, then it's good. That's true. Are you potentially in that place? Am I? 4 years ago, when things maybe didn't happen according to the shape that was supposed to go down, if that's ever a thing, this idea of fraud and voter fraud and, manipulation by outside sources, it was the talk of the town for fucking years to the point of impeachment. And it's all you could hear. And by the way, it was basically proven, at least legally, what's that? Is that true? To be total bullshit. And still it's accepted as if it was reality. That is the power of spin. That is the power of delusion. It's amazing. In a sense, it's beautiful to witness. It's also terrifying. I want to be careful what I say because this thing can just get totally canceled, at least put in such a way that it's not seen or a box of truth above. Can you believe, regardless of whatever you think of the dude, I'm not a big fan, but can you believe that recently the United States president was speaking on the news and the anchor on another screen came and intercepted and kicked the president off and say, we just can't broadcast that. He's clearly not telling the truth. Who the fuck are you to say? And you know what? Let me be lied to. Because then my heart goes, I'm being lied to. This is bullshit. And I get to be the only independent researcher there is, me. Give me the information and let me decide. Let me see the data. Right, and so I was speaking about this the other day and somebody wrote, oh, independent fact checkers are not censorship. Really? There is only one independent fact checker, and that is you. And if you're not being given the information, all of the information, you do not have the data you need to make accurate decisions. So 4 years ago, of course it had to be voter fraud. And now, if you even mention that, you're some weird conspiracy theorist, QAnon, anti-patriotic. What? If there is fraud in this process, we should all want that to be uncovered. But look, let's just say, and I'm not saying in any way this is it, or that I want this. So please do not get lost in what I'm saying, right? Into, oh, this is what he thinks. No, what I think is that if there's fraud, we should all want to know about it and clean that shit up. But what if, and I'm not saying this is it, what if in discovering fraud, the guy you don't want to win then becomes the dude, or keeps the throne or whatever? Then would you prefer that we don't go have a look, right? If it turned the outcome towards what you might perceive as bad or even evil, is it therefore good to cover up the truth? Would you prefer to be lied to in order to protect the truth? What a paradox. That's where we're living, friends. How else have we been lied to? Well, why don't you compare the number of deaths in your country in 2020 to that in 2019 and 2018 and 2017 and 2016? Shouldn't there be more? Because there's this new thing that's taking so many lives, and yet all the things that always do, like heart disease and others, you know, car accidents should be down because less people were driving this year, right? But there's an amazing decrease in things that are pretty consistent, especially in a generally unhealthy culture. Is it because we're healthier? No. Is it maybe because, as was clearly admitted, that if somebody died with this thing, they would be marked as having died of this thing? And you know what I'm talking about, but if I say it's words, I'm so much more likely to be censored here. And that's fucking terrifying. Terrifying. And if you're not scared of that, please, friends. The access of truth. Do I know the truth? Hell no. Do I want to? Yes. Do I need data and information? Yeah. Can I even find it? My phone auto updated last night. Damn. It's getting worse. And we've got to take a stand. And the stand starts here. The stand starts with, you know what? Even if the truth is terrifying and terrible, and even if it's not what I want it to be, I'm for truth. And let's look at how we are manipulated, whether towards good or bad, right? Outcomes. Like, how are we steered? So, you know, you've been basically on consensual house arrest for most of the year, regardless of where you live. You have been, for the most part, and in some places, like the place where I live, more than others, you have been basically on consensual house arrest because your compassion was elicited for your consent, right? If you go outside, you're going to kill old people. Have you been told that this year? And the answer is yes. I mean, maybe not in those words, actually, pretty much in those words. We were told recently in some places to report our neighbors if they had family over for a holiday in the celebration of gratitude. And we're not allowed to sing where I live. Yet I can go somewhere as I was a bit ago. I've got to wear a mask when I walk into the door of a restaurant. But as soon as I sit down, it can come off. What the fuck? Right? And my compassion for the elderly, because I don't want to hurt anyone. Right? I mean, I'm sad that I was not able to see my mother who lives 2 hours away this week because she's terrified. And the truth is, my mother recently, last year, had a bone marrow transplant and has very little of an immune system and has to get 19 vaccines this year and to catch up. One of those will be mandatory, likely, and maybe militarily enforced. We shall see. But she's terrified. And maybe she should be. You know, maybe she's at high risk. What do I know? I mean, I know that from the data that I'm receiving, but the data, the voice of very many doctors who are absolutely being suppressed argue differently, argue against these tests, certainly argue against the so-called solution that will be rolled out soon. What is true? And while I'm, you know, celebrating my compassion by consenting to house arrest, you can listen to what, like, the WHO just had to say about lockdown as a principal way to prevent the spread of this thing. What did they say? It's terrifying. It's terrible. It means more death. By how? Starvation, poverty, depression, suicide. Are you tuning into, lack of the ability to receive medical care due to hospital shutdown, curfews, discouragement from going to receive treatment for something that you might need it for? And if you die of that, you probably get put over here and you died of this thing. Because I actually receive tens of thousands of dollars if I'm the hospital who says I just clocked another patient who died of this thing, and the numbers go up while these other numbers go down, and still the overall numbers rather equal. But if you choose to be that one independent research there is, and follow my kind of subtle suggestions here, I'm trying to be careful so I'm not just completely canceled or hated. Because I do care and love and want to be loved and want to belong. But I'm terrified at the idea that that desire is encouraging me to keep my mouth shut and eclipse my speech and occult my truth, even though I can clearly see this dystopian nightmare that has long been projected is rapidly aligning. And while the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and the middle class is dissolved to the point of poverty and desperation, despair. That in this year, more American dollars were printed than in any year before, and there will be consequences for that. So, I was out watching surfers a couple of weeks ago and thinking about this idea of the first wave and second wave, and then they wait for the big one of the set. And it doesn't look, by the way, like a wave of massive outbreak. And besides that, a lot of people will just intentionally have it injected into them. That's scary. Experimental new procedures rushed through trials to save the world from a thing that has such a small percentage of. Let me just leave that blank and hopefully you'll go do your independent research. We are living, friends, in absolutely terrifying times that we must resist by choosing to keep our eyes wide open in the midst of a powerful spell in this collective dream. And that starts right here. Regardless of if it leads to something I want to see or feels aligned to my dream, I want first and foremost to have access to the truth. If it's being eclipsed, is it not somehow because I want it to be? And if so, that's on me. All right. Well, if you're close to my work, if you're on my mailing list, which you can be, and I hope you will be, because in a time where a lot of access, I guess, to fellowship is being dissolved by cancel culture and media and corporate censorship, right? It's important for all of us to reach out, get each other's emails. If you're only connecting on Facebook or on YouTube or whatever, reach out to your friends, link up, get their information, make sure that you have a way to get in touch if these only ways that you're doing so now gets rubbed away. There's a chance of that. So, be proactive. And one way you can stay in touch with me, regardless of what goes down, likely will be by joining my email list. I don't email too often, but you can do that at GeminiBrett.com. And I gotta export that thing from MailChimp where it is now, because they just publicly spoke out against astrology, for example, and are canceling and censoring emails, astrological emails, especially if it's around daily horoscopes, which is fucking terrifying. And it's one of many examples of where this greater thing of let's definitely not spread fake news, and so let's pass a bunch of laws and celebrate the ones who are censoring everything so we can get down to this point of truth where we should censor astrology because of course it's not true. How many warning lights should be going off for you when things like that are said? Are they going off? Are you allowing them to go off? And if not, why? And have you been led along a path where you are asked, for the sake of truth, to celebrate censorship? What? Censorship is never true. Sorry. So, GeminiBrett.com, you can sign up on my mailing list, and those who are know that we've been doing these moon games, absolutely free, just gathering together online, kind of gathering together, where we talk a bit about the charts and what's alive. And I haven't done that for the Scorpio new moon. I was traveling, and I didn't do it for this Gemini full moon because I've just been trying to focus on my life and my love, which I'm very blessed has been going well, and my business has been going well. I mean, I'm very privileged and blessed to be able to work and to participate with amazing beings who are on their path of growth, remind me to be on mine. I'm so blessed to have a loving partner that I'm locked down with, who supports my growth and challenges me to grow, and is the same for her and receives my challenges and invitations and welcomings. We're very blessed to have an amazing high-level teacher being a 5-year-old guy called Koa around here, and a cat who's not always asleep, but he is right now. I'm very blessed in my life. I'm very blessed to have family close by and people that I love and people that love me, and I'm very, very, very blessed to have in my life as a consulting astrologer the opportunity to connect very intimately and intentionally with people who are on their path of growth and evolution, not by avoiding the pain, but by diving into it. And I'm honored to be able to talk story with folks like every day and hear the most amazing and challenging and beautiful and painful and truthful things, you know, and receive and share wisdom. So I'm very blessed by that. And the truth is, a lot of these like corporate social platforms have absolutely been a blessing. Like I'm doing this live on Facebook, I'm posting this to YouTube. Both of these places have been a blessing in my life. For my work, they've been challenging in other ways in regards to distraction and reception of truth and whatever. Like falling prey to the algorithms, especially in these last years, right? So I want to make sure that even in my fear and discouragement at this time, that I'm also keep a very strong flame burning of true optimism and hope and foresight in the astrological energies that things will change and they will get better, but it has to start with me. Right? And that's you, and you, and you, and you, and you. It has to start here. And today, and in this eclipse cauldron, that literally starts with, I demand the power of truth. I demand the power of information so I can align myself through my own intuition, intention, and wisdom to the truth. All right, so please sign up for my mailing list at GeminiBrett.com. If you do, before a couple weeks from now, in this very strong Sagittarius new moon so close to the south lunar node that a total solar eclipse will occur with Mercury somewhere beyond the sun, Earth, Moon, Sun, Mercury, Neptune. You sign up on my mailing list and you'll get an email about a moon group. We can only do 100 folks, and then we do breakout rooms of like 4 or 5 so people can connect and you can know that there's others like you who are on a path of growth and utilizing this beautiful tool called astrology, the correspondences of the heavenly happenings, as an assist to do so. So anyway, maybe I'll see you there. If not, let me just say thank you for the present of your presence. I'd love to hear your ideas. I'm sure some of this is like absolute phooey to you, but some of it must have been gluey for you because here we are. So thanks. Love you. I would be much more alone if I didn't have the opportunity to share these thoughts with beings like yourself who are on a similar path. So thank you very much. And I hope to see you on Earth someday. Until then, I will see you in space.